to discuss an antitrust decision that we have just taken, and the Commissioner will now give a statement before we move on to our traditional questions and answers session. Commissioner?
Well, thank you very much. Today, the Commission has decided to fine Google 1.49 billion euros for breaking EU antitrust rules. Google has engaged in illegal practices when it comes to their search advertising brokering in order to cement its dominant market position. This is the third antitrust fine that we have imposed on Google. In June 2017, we fined Google for its illegal behavior in comparison shopping services. And in July 2018, we fined Google for its illegal behavior relating to the Android mobile operating system for mobile apps and services. I'd like to address what Google has been doing to comply with those two earlier decisions. But before I do that, just let me give you a few more details on the decision that we took today. As you know, when you type in a query into Google's search engine, you not only get the results, but you also get ads that are based on the words that you typed in. In fact, that sort of advertising is by far Google's main source of revenue. Google sells advertising on its own search page. But Google also has a business of brokering advertising space on other websites. That could include websites like newspapers or blogs or travel sites. They will all include a search box. That's the point. And having search on your sites, that allows the owners of those websites to make money in much the same way Google does on its own sites by selling the space to search results. These other websites, well, they rely on an advertising broker. And Google is by far the biggest of those brokers with its platform AdSense for search. And this market is an important market because it's an entry point for competitors, including other search providers for online advertising platforms. By gaining a foothold in advertising brokering, well, then they can grow their business, or they could grow their business, and try to challenge Google in the general search advertising. Google is dominant when it comes to online advertising brokering market, with market shares in Europe well above 70% since 2006. And there are high barriers to entry, which makes it very hard for competitors to come in. Despite that, competition should be possible in this market. Different websites can use different brokers, and the same website can actually use more than one broker to provide different ads. Indeed, our investigation showed that many websites had an interest to use more than one broker. Today's decision is about how Google abused its dominance to stop websites using brokers other than the AdSense platform. For the most important websites, which Google calls direct partners, Google provides brokering services through tailored agreements. Our investigation looked at more than 200 of those agreements, and they contained all at least one type of restrictions that harm competition. These different types of restrictions, they often overlapped in time. The first type is an exclusivity provision, which Google began to include in its contracts from 2006. It meant that the most commercially important direct partners were prevented from sourcing search ads from Google's rivals on any of their websites. The second type is called premium placement. Google began including it in its contract from 2009 to replace over time the existing explicit exclusivity provisions. These clauses, they didn't completely stop direct partners sourcing ads from Google's rivals, but they meant that direct partners would have to take a minimum of search ads from Google and put them in the most visible and most profitable parts of the page. So the best web page space, where users were most likely to click, was still reserved for Google. The third type of restriction even allowed Google to control how websites displayed search ads of Google's rivals. Under this clause, website owners, they would have to get the written approval from Google before changing the way they displayed search ads of Google's rivals, right down to the size, the color, and even the font of those ads. As in many digital markets, search advertising is a market with strong network effects. So the more users you have, the more valuable your services becomes to each and every one of them. That meant that to compete effectively, you need to build scale. These restrictive clauses, well, they led to a vicious circle. Google's rivals, they were unable to grow and to compete. And as a result of that, well, owners of websites had limited options for selling advertising space on those websites and were forced solely to rely on Google. And as a result from that, Google benefited from network effects and became even stronger. There was no reason for Google to include these restrictive clauses in their contracts, except to keep rivals out of the market. And this is why we concluded that between 2006 and 2016, Google's behavior was illegal under EU antitrust rules. It prevented its rivals from having a chance to innovate and to compete in the market on their merits. Advertisers and website owners, they have less choice and likely faced higher prices that would be passed on to consumers. The fine of 1.49 billion euros reflects the serious and the sustained nature of Google's infringement. And anyone, of course, who have suffered damage because of Google's behavior can also claim compensation from Google through national courts. Google removed these illegal restrictions from its contract in 2016, around the time when we issued the statement of objection. At a minimum, our decision requires Google to put a stop to those restrictions or any other restriction with an equivalent effect and not to reinstate them. Let me now go back for a moment to the Google Shopping and the Google Android decisions and address the information that we have about the changes Google has made in the way it does business. I'll start with the Google Shopping case. Back in 2017, in June, when we took our decision, Google systematically put its own shopping comparison service at the top of the first page of search results in the shopping unit. No competing comparison shopping service was able to appear in the shopping unit. They were on average to be found on page 4 in search results. Our decision requires Google to treat rival comparison shopping services the same way as they treat their own. And it's up to Google to find an effective way to do that. Google has chosen to open up its shopping unit, which was, as said, previously reserved exclusively for Google's own services. Since September 2017, rival comparison shopping services has been able to bid for space in the shopping unit. It has taken time for this mechanism to show results. The data that we shared in June last year found that around 30% of shopping units included at least one of Google's competitors. The latest data, they show that these 30% now has increased to 75% of shopping units that include at least one of Google's rivals. In the June 2018 data, we also found that only just about 6% of clicks in the Google Shopping unit went to competitors. Now, this 6% has also increased. Around 40% of clicks on products results now go to competitors to Google. These numbers reflect the situation after Google made changes earlier to address criticism that previous numbers were inflated by competitors that actually did not really compete in shopping comparison. These changes now require all participants' services to have a sufficient range of offers and a set of core comparison functions. Google also just announced a feature that it will let users choose whether the shopping unit should show links to comparison shopping sites or directly to those sites where you find the merchant and the product, as it used to do. With this new feature, the user will be able to switch or to toggle between the current window that shows links going directly to merchants and windows that will show links going to shopping comparison sites, Google's competitors. And this means that users will be able to choose what kind of results they want to see. All these are positive developments. Obviously, we will keep monitoring the market. Shopping is just one part of specialized search. Google also offers services of that kind when it comes to jobs and local search. The decision we took in June 2017 gives us a framework to look at other services exactly as jobs or local search. What we have found is that those different specialized services, well, they have some things in common, but they are also different. There are important differences among them. So we need to look individually at those services. And we have noted that Google is rolling out certain changes to its product in these areas, and this is, of course, something that we will look at closely. I'd now like to turn to the Android decision of July 2018. This was a case about the type of restrictions that Google imposed on mobile device manufacturers and network operators that used Android. First, Google de facto required manufacturers to pre-install Google Search and browser apps. Second, Google paid manufacturers of phones and network operators to make sure that only the Google apps was pre-installed. And thirdly, Google obstructed the development of competing mobile operating systems. These restrictions, they all aimed to ensure that search on mobile devices was directed to Google Search, cementing Google's position in the market. The decision meant that Google can no longer oblige device manufacturers to take Google Search and browser products if they take the Google Play Store. It also means that rival search and browser providers, well, they can strike exclusive deals with device manufacturers to pre-install their products instead of Google products. While this, of course, creates new commercial opportunities that did not exist before, there were concerns that this was not sufficient to restore competition. Google has now announced that it intends to provide a choice screen for Android users in Europe. for Android phones that already exist in the market, and also for new Android phones where Google products may be pre-installed. And this should let consumers choose which search and browser provider they want on their Android phone. We've seen in the past that a choice screen can be an effective way to promote user choice. In the Google Android case, it has the potential to give users a real choice about what search and browser they want on their Android device. This should also allow Google's rivals to be chosen upfront by users in cases where Google has been pre-installed on the phone. It is welcome that Google is stepping up its effort in connection with the Google Android decision. And of course, we will watch closely to see how the choice screen mechanism evolves. Platforms like Google play a vital role in digital markets. Businesses and consumers, well, they depend on platforms to get the best out of digitization. So, illegal behavior in these cases, of course, is a very serious affair. We're thinking very carefully about the future of competition because everything becomes digitized. Last year, I appointed 3 special advisors to look at the challenges that competition policy faces as digital technology changes every industry we know. I'm looking forward to receiving their report very soon. In our reflection for the future, as well as our enforcement work, our aim will, of course, remain the same: to make sure that market works well, so European consumers have choice, innovative products, and fair prices. Thank you.
And thank you, Commissioner Vestager. So we will now proceed to your questions. I take the opportunity to also remind you that we have experts at hand to speak to you afterwards. They know everything about Google, from Google Shopping to Google AdSense. Rumor has it they were even on Google Plus at some stage. So if you could start with your questions relating directly to the case, and then we will take your questions on other topics. And please remember to state the name of your name and the name of your media. And I'll start with Jorge, who was hands up halfway through the speech.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. 2 questions. The first one, I mean, this is the final case of the Google saga. With all the issues that has been and solutions proposed by Google, could you say that this is definitely a case closed, or there are some other issues maybe related to other fields, for example, how data is managed or other concerns that could reflect in a future state of objections or something? And a second question, this is the most important case in the competition field that the Commission has dealt with over the past years, and also in your during your mandate. Do you think that this case will increase your chances of becoming, for example, a candidate for the presidency of the Commission, given that tomorrow will be an important day for you?
Well, final. As said, we see positive developments in both the Google Shopping case and the Google AdSense case. We will keep monitoring these developments because as I speak, I don't know what will be the finer details as to how this choice screen will be presented to users. And we're still looking into the search market for jobs and the search market for locals. We keep getting complaints from people who are concerned as to how these markets work. So we will keep doing our job also in those markets. For me, the most important thing here is to enable user choice. If you saw what I said initially here, the changes, they are always about enabling users to choose what they want to do, what products they want to have. Because I think that the ability to choose also makes you feel that you're in control. And that's a very important thing, because when you want to feel that the market is actually serving you as a consumer and not the other way around, exactly choice and being in control, that is of the essence. And that I hope that we have promoted with the casework in these 3 cases.
You.
That was the answer to the second question.
Thank you. Any further questions at this stage? Lewis?
Commissioner Lewis Crofts, MLEX, just to follow up on my colleague's questions just now. You said you gave the shopping figures, the percentage of clicks. Is that enough for you now? Is that what is 70% of clicks or 2/3 of screens? The figures that you gave, is that enough for you? Is that a competitive internet market for comparison search, or would you like to see more? And secondly, to follow up on Jorge, you've stood at this podium and been at conferences telling us for several years that competition law shouldn't be politicized. Do you think that running a political campaign on behalf of a party or being involved in it in elections is compatible with being a competition commissioner, which is a quasi-judicial job? Thank you.
First, on the question of whether it's enough or not, I don't really think that we should be the final judge of that, because there's no magic number, nor in these cases. When I give you the numbers, it is to say that this market has improved. As said, in 70% of cases where the shopping unit is shown, a rival to Google would appear. And I think that in 40% of cases, more than one rival would appear. So you see that rivals are gaining visibility. I do hope that this market will develop. It has developed a lot since we took the decision, where there was no rival in the shopping unit. The point is that if a market is to develop, consumers will have to use their opportunities to make choices. And as said, we will keep following to see how will this develop. I, for one, think that it could be a good thing that you can choose if you want to see the products, or if you want to see the shopping comparison services that can allow you to compare prices, if things are in store, when it can be shipped, at what cost, all of that content that comes with shopping comparison. But that's my preference, and other consumers will have other preferences. One of the things that this Commission has been very careful about is to make sure that we have rules that are transparent and public, so that people can see that we do our job as we should do it. And that goes for each and every one of us. And that, of course, goes for me as well. I will be active in the coming months to see if I can enable more voters to go to vote. That, I think, is not only for anyone in office, it's a thing for everyone. To say to daughters, mothers, fathers, grandmothers, grandchildren, let's make this a celebration of democracy. Let's go vote. The latest numbers I saw was that only 1 out of 2 Europeans are considering to vote in the European elections. And that I do hope that everyone will engage in changing. Not with necessarily a wish as to vote for this party or that party, but to get out the vote. And that, I find, is completely compatible with everything that anyone is doing.
Thank you. Further questions on Simon, and then I'll...
Thank you, Commissioner. Simon van Dorp for Politico. In the AdSense probe, there are a number of findings, for example, in relation to the markets, the dominance of Google in the market of online advertising, and perhaps also some findings of data that could those feed into other issues that have been raised in relation to online advertising, which now, for example, the French and the UK competition authorities are looking into?
That I don't know. As you say, it can be very relevant for national competition authorities to look into the behavior in this market, because we have this paradox. We see giant companies with a global footprint, and yet the advertising market is national. We would have no Google cases if we, by definition, thought that all markets were global, because businesses are global. Here we have a national footprint. We have many, many differences between member states when it comes to the advertising market and the search market as well. The Czech Republic in particular, but you'd find a number of other differences. We do hope, of course, that the casework that we do inspire and enable national competition authorities, but I wouldn't know exactly how this case directly relates to the cases that colleagues are doing nationally.
You first, and I'll come back. Yeah.
Hi, Commissioner. James Fraser from CNN International. Commissioner, added to the previous fines for US companies, does the EU have something against US tech firms?
Well, I don't think that the truck companies feel it like that. At least I think they would like to be included. Because what you see is that we have had quite a number of antitrust cases over the years. What they deal with is the way you do business in Europe. And you're more than welcome to come here and do business. Only you should compete on the merits. And this is what we saw in the truck cartel. This is what we have seen in the Google cases. This is what we have seen in all the many cartels on car parts. I hope you enjoyed the wonderful infographic on that, so that you can imagine and remember every time you sit in your car, the foam in your seat has been cartelized. The seat belt has been cartelized. When you put your key in or press the button, the alternator has been cartelized. When the lights are then turned on, they have been cartelized. The businesses in those and many other car park cartels, they come from a number of different countries. Again, what's important is that they do business in Europe. And that is what is triggering a fine if you do not play by our rule book.
Jeroen?
Jeroen Seegraat, Financieel Dagblad in the Netherlands. Can you say anything about the calculation of the fine? Is the abuse less severe than Google Shopping and Android?
When a fine is calculated, is first and foremost that we look at the turnover in the affected market. And you have the search advertising market. I think most of us think about it when we do a Google search. Then you see the advertising that comes with it, depending on what you've been looking for. And that's the huge bulk of revenue when it comes to search advertising. The brokering market is somewhat smaller. When you have a search box on a travel site, any other site, well, then both the one who owns the site can monetize the space, but of course the broker will also monetize the space. So the reason of the fine, when you sort of mentally compare with the turnover of the Google company as such, reflects the fact that the brokering market is smaller than the search advertising market as such. Of course, the fact that it lasted for 10 years makes it a more important offense. So we had a couple of sort of aggravating factors, but it is sort of the turnover in the market that's the most important trigger in the level of fine.
James Crisp, and then here.
Hello, Commissioner. I'm over here. Commissioner, out of all of the tech giants that you've dealt with in your term, which one would you say has been the naughtiest? And which one have you cost the most money? Thank you.
Well, you know, since the GDPR, I don't keep lists. And they are very different, very different. Here, the total of the Google fines, I think they are 8.25 billion euros, something like that. But still, we're not at the, even in total, 10% cap of global turnover.
I'm going to go in front and then Rochelle.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm Andrés Gil from El Diario de Spain. I would like to ask you a practical question. You have just said that the fines to Google are up to 8.2 billion euros. Are these fines getting paid? How do they pay? When? What do you do with the money? Where the money goes? All that things. Thank you.
In either you can pay us in cash with a financial instrument, or you can make a bank guarantee. You have to do that before you file an appeal of the decision if you want to do that. So the fine is placed on a closed account. We cannot touch it, businesses cannot touch it if the decision is appealed. And then the fine will remain there till the court has decided if we were right or wrong. Of course, we do our best to make sure that the court agrees with us. If the court agrees with us, then the fine is distributed to member states in the same key as all member states pay their membership contribution. I only remember the Danish numbers, but if it's a fine of 100 million euros, it would be 2 million in the Danish context. So you see the differences between member states. Well, of course, that would be quite varied, how much you get from it, but it goes back to member state. And this is, of course, to make sure that there is no suspicion that we have, an incentive when the coffers are empty to take out our fine mechanism and start writing out fines because we lack money. That cannot happen.
Rochelle, then Kushita.
Rochelle Toplinski with the FT. You mentioned you were looking into jobs and into local search, and I know that there were some travel websites that had originally complained, and that Google has search services for both flights and hotels, and I'm just wondering if those are at all being looked
at. No, not those specific ones that you mentioned. These are markets that develops, and as said, Google are also changing their behavior in this market, and this we will take into consideration when we investigate further where we have strong complainants in the local search and in jobs.
Kushita?
Commissioner, hi, Kushita Vasan from PAR. Just going back to AdSense, one of the parties affected by this case have just put out a statement saying while they welcome the Commission's decision fining Google, they are also calling on the Commission to require remedies to effectively restore competition. They're saying that a cease and desist order was not going to restore competition, and could we get your thoughts on that? Thanks.
This is, of course, one of the things that we think about the most, also when we are sort of more forward-looking. Because when you are in fast-moving markets, and even if we were as speedily as one could possibly expect of us, the risk is still, of course, that the market will have moved on, and it's very difficult to restore competition as it were. What we have seen in the shopping decision, in the Android decision, is that Google is changing its business practices. When it comes to the decision of today, we saw that change, or one change in business practice, when we sent the statement of objection, that these restrictive, in our opinion, illegal clauses, they were removed from the contracts. Unfortunately, so far, we have seen no pickup from other advertising brokers in this market. There are competitors, but they are quite small. So, of course, that's an area of concern.
Catherine Fiore, EU reporter. Usually when companies abuse a dominant position, it results in higher prices for their goods. And once that question is addressed, then prices, should really go down, I suppose. I'm just wondering, the people who have lost out are the people who've been running AdSense on their website and haven't been fully reimbursed. Will those undertakings be able to seek that being addressed? And it probably isn't. Maybe larger companies will go through the court system, but that seems to be quite heavy duty approach. Is there any sort of idea of automatic remuneration for those websites that have essentially been how should I describe this? They've lost revenue that they should have received. Thank you.
Well, yes, I think that if you're a competitor, not being able to offer your services to a travel website or a news website, well, I think you might have a case. I don't know, but you might try to seek for damages in national courts. Could also be that a travel website would think, well, I didn't have the benefits of competition. I'm afraid that prices were higher than they should be. Of course, this is just speculation on my side, but I would understand why these ideas would occur. This is why you can seek for damages in national courts. And we will, of course, do our best to have a public version of the decision as fast as possible, because that decision is, of course, available for those who will seek damages in national courts because they find that they have suffered from the illegal Google behavior.
Thank you. Any further questions on AdSense, Musa?
Werner Musle, Frankfurter Allgemeine. On the two first cases, you're reporting progress. Does that mean that you can exclude any fines for non-compliance right now? And if not, what would possible fines for non-compliance depend upon? Rather on the further developments of the market or from some Google behavior you wouldn't agree on? Thank you.
Yes, as you say, if we could prove non-compliance from the day when we suspected non-compliance, daily penalties could be put in place until there was compliance. When I cite the numbers that we have now and the intentions of Google in the Android decision, this is also to say, well, we don't have a non-compliant issue as it is now. We will, of course, keep following this market, but I think it is positive that Google takes steps that allows for more consumer choice. I, of course, do hope that consumers will use this choice and also that competitors of Google will be able to make the best of that, because that is what these cases are about. Is this to say that the illegal Google behavior that cemented their dominant position in search, that it stops, but not only that it stops, but also that competitors can be there for us as consumers to have a real choice.
Thank you. I'm seeing the Italian. Is anyone else still on AdSense, or can I move over to? No? Then I will move over Galavotti and then David.
Good morning, Commissioner Galavotti in Kronos Italy. It's just a question on the judgment by the EU court on Tercas. They stated that it was not state aid, the intervention of the interbanking private fund. I wonder if you have anything to say about that. And also, if I may, I mean, Matteo Renzi was indirectly but heavily damaged by that decision. Have you anything to say about that? I mean, the damage was political because if that decision would have not been taken, the Banca Popolare of Etruria would have been simply saved without burden sharing, which was politically very damaging for Matteo Renzi. I just wonder if you have anything to say about that. Thank you.
Well, on the judgment in itself, of course, we'll have to come back because the assessment about the use of these funds is an assessment that you will have seen also in previous cases. It's in line with Commission practice. It's not something specific to the Tercas situation. When you look at the 4 small banks, and of course Banca Intrusia being one of them, well, I think the thing that triggered their resolution was a decision by the Bank of Italy in 2015. That was what put these 4 banks into resolution. And one of the things that I think it is important to always maintain is that depositors, they were protected at all times. That doesn't change the fact that some people were still missold. And this is why we work with Italian authorities to make sure that we can set up schemes that compensates people who have been missold, who thought that they had a simple account and were protected by a deposit scheme, but then it turned out that they had bought a product that could be bailed in. And I think it is important that we do that for obvious social reasons and for reasons of fairness. We've had 2 different schemes, one where it was an individual approach and one where it was a more sort of group-based approach where you try to find out, well, who could have been harmed here. And that we do, and we are, I think, in very constructive discussions with the Italian government as to how can we proceed this, because we share the goal to make sure that people who are missold, that they can be compensated. Obviously, the banks themselves should do that. They are the first to call. If that cannot happen, then, of course, for everyone else in the form of the state being able to step in.
Thank you. David?
David Carretta, Radio Radicale. Follow up on the Tercas judgment. First of all, since you have said that you want to come back on the judgment, are you going to appeal this judgment, or are you going to change your policy approach on the issue, since Tercas was a precedent, and a precedent used in other cases like the 4 banks and other? So, what do you mean when you say we will come back on the judgment? Second question, yesterday the president of the Italian Bank Association asked for your step down because in a way, for the fact that Tercas was used as a precedent, at the end of the day, it have an important impact not only on the government of that time, but also on the financial system. So, how do you respond? How do you answer to these critics? And if I may, an update on Alitalia, another long story. What are you going to do, since we are still waiting a restructuring plan for a bridge loan that it's not a bridge loan but a different sort of aid? Thank you.
On the last question, the update on Alitalia, that can be very short. On our side, on the state aid discussion, there are no further comments. The sale handled by the Italian authorities is ongoing, and we have no decision on the state aid side as of yet. When you look at the Banca Tercas, sort of the Commission reasoning is not new. What we reason, and has been reasoning before, is the fact that if you have a payment that is mandatory, and if the fund that is created with a mandatory payment can be, the use of that fund is imputed to the state, well, then we find state aid. In the Italian case, what happened was that you both have the fund with the mandatory payment, and then you have a voluntary arm. And the voluntary arm then stepped in and did what the mandatory arm couldn't do, because that would be state aid. And that means that the situation on ground would be slightly more nuanced than the way you put it. And as said, when it comes to the four smaller Italian banks, it wasn't a decision by us that put these banks into resolution in 2015. It was the decision of the Italian National Bank. So I think when you look into this, you see a much more varied picture with the role that Italian banks as such are playing with the voluntary arm, and the role of national authorities with us when we do the state aid assessment. On whether we will appeal it or not, we have not taken a decision because it was so recent, so we have to analyze more in depth.
Thank you. I have Jorge again, second round.
Thank you, and sorry about that. It's on a different issue now, on the possible merger between Commerzbank and Deutsche Bank. Since tomorrow, I think there is an important meeting scheduled between the board of the two banks. I would like to know, how do you see this potential merger, also in the light of your recent decision of the Alstom-Siemens merger? Thank you.
Well, of course, I'm reading the papers too, but on our working desk, we have no merger. We have no announced merger, we have no notified merger, we have no merger in process. So on the specifics, obviously, I have no comments. Just one thing about mergers that create big entities. When we have a competition concern, it's not because you become big. It's because that your customers has no one else to turn to. If prices go up, choice go down, innovation is at risk of stopping. That is what we're looking at. It's not sheer size in itself. It is if you, when you merge, say, well, then prices can come up and consumers shouldn't have the same choice as before. Can you go to someone else? Would there be someone else who would still give me a loan at an affordable interest rate or give me choice of different products? That would be what we would be analyzing. And in the Siemens-Alstom case, you know that for the huge majority of the market, metros, trams, intercity trains, urban signaling, either problems were solved or we had no problems, because if the merged entity would say, well, we will charge a higher price on metros, people could go to someone else to buy their metro trains. No concerns in that respect. We only had concerns in mainline signaling and very high-speed train, because our analysis, also looking forward 5-10 years, would show that if the merged entity decided to have higher prices for mainline signaling, there would be no one else to turn to. And then, obviously, customers would have to pay these higher prices. So this is what we look at. It's not the fact that you merge to become big. It's the fact that customers and consumers has no one else to turn to. And you can see in the past that big companies has merged to become even bigger companies in beer, in cement, in steel, in a number of areas, dairy products, where you find that it's not size, it's the market functioning that is of our interest.
Lorenzo?
Consoli from Asca News. Forgive me for going back to Tercas. I think my colleague asked you one question that you didn't answer to, which is, according to the sentence, the fact that there was, I mean, the Commission has not demonstrated that that was a state aid because of the mandatory character of the rule. That was money coming from the voluntary arm. So there is a clear difference between the judgment by the tribunal, the EU, and your judgment. Are you going to appeal this decision because of this clear difference, or are you going to continue on this the same policy because you say it has been used already in the past?
Well, actually, it happens, I'm afraid, also often that I don't precisely answer the questions asked. But here, actually, I think I did answer that we don't know yet if we will appeal or not, because the judgment is very recent, and we need to know what is the reasoning. What should be our approach in this issue? It is obvious that we will have to address it one way or another, because this is a court decision, and that has effect on the way we work and the way the world works. So we will come back on the exact issue of how we will deal with the judgment. My point was just to say that before one makes sort of a full chain of events, to say that because of this decision, something also happened in other banks and other banks and other banks, to say, I think, now just stop, look at the Tercas decision specifically, because when you look at the 4 smaller banks, it was another chain of events that led to the result that is on ground today.
Many thanks, Commissioner. I will take one last, but it has to be quick. Dr. Tom.
German press. Just a short question to Gazprom, because last year you had the commitments from Gazprom. I just wonder whether the Commission has some monitoring about the implementation of these commitments, and how are you satisfied with this?
Yes, we do monitor this commitment as set when the decision was public. For us, this is actually where enforcement starts, because now we enforce the binding commitments on Gazprom to change their behavior in the European gas market. And this is also why we have a trustee to oversee that Gazprom is actually doing as they should do, because these are indeed binding commitments. And if you as a company do not live up to binding commitments, the result would be a fine. It's some time ago I had the latest update, but when I had an update, Gazprom was implementing as they should the new clauses of, for instance, the price review mechanism, change of delivery points in their contracts with those customers who wanted to have it.
Thank you. That concludes our press conference today. Thank you, Commissioner Vestager. This press conference will be followed shortly by the college readout with Commissioners Avramopoulos, King, and Gabriel. They will be joining the press room shortly for that. So thank you very much, and stay seated. Thank you.